In this video, we're going to cover the button component and the forms and tables design system. So we have all of these different buttons and they contain different properties and nested components. And then we have our button group. So to illustrate the capabilities, I'm just going to go to our assets and go to our button and show you the different variations you can create. So I'm going to drag that on. You could also do so by just dragging out an instance like that. So we have our button. We have from blue to green, red, and these are using the main colors from our color system. So you could go ahead and customize it if you wanted to. So I'll just leave this as red. And then we have the icon left, icon right, and social media. So let's actually create a sign in with Apple button. So this can be done by making it the white variant. We'll get rid of the other two icons and we'll change this. So this is a nested component. So this itself is a component. You can change it here in the properties panel. You can also just click onto it and you have access to change it. So we're going to go from Facebook to Apple and we're going to type in sign in with Apple. One thing to note, I did not include text as one of the properties. I think it's easier to just click in to that text and change it. So sign in with Apple. Okay, beautiful. So now we have our sign in with Apple button. And now let's just create the other sign in fields that we'd want. So let's say you can sign in with Apple or you can sign in with your email and password. So to do that, we will drag in a few other components. So we'll go to our forms, and in our forms we have the input. So we have input, it's the size is medium, this size is large. Let's change this to medium and let's make sure it's hugging contents. Okay, so now here let's just get rid of the placeholder. This is going to be email, and then we have password. Email and password looks good. Now we're going to put two more buttons here. So we'll just drag out a new button from this one, and this is going to be a link. So let's change it to red, and this is going to say forgot password as a question. So the type, it's a link. We'll get rid of the social media and let's type out forgot password. Okay, that looks good. And now the last button we're going to create is the sign in. So if they do email and password, they click a button that says sign in. So we'll get rid of the social media and we'll make this blue, and this will just simply sign in. Okay, that looks good. Now we're just going to wrap this in an auto layout. But before we do that, let's say or, so sign in with Apple or email and password, and we'll change this to a text small bold, and we'll change the color to our gray 0, and now we'll just select everything and click Shift A. So that made the auto layout. This does not look how I wanted it. That's because it is wrapping. What we want to do is have a vertical layout. That looks good. We will center everything. That looks good. And now we're going to actually go ahead and select everything. So I'm just going to click enter, everything selected. And for layout, let's make it fill. Okay, we have our basic sign in. So or actually has to go up here, and let's center the text. So this is looking better. And then we can adjust the spacing. So the spacing looks a little bit too much here. So let's do 12. And then let's actually make this a small. And then let's group these together and kind of change the spacing. So instead of 12, let's do 8. And then let's give it some padding on the bottom. Let's do 16. Or rather, let's just do 8. Okay, so that looks nice. So last thing, we're going to do one more component, and we're going to put this inside of a modal. So we'll cover modals in a separate video, as well as these inputs. But basically what I want to do is take this and place it in. So I can try to do that by cutting and pasting, that's obviously not going to work. The way to put a component within a component is through the replace component. So the modal has this replace component, and then I can swap this out with what we've created here. To do that, this has to be a component itself. So we'll make it a component, and we'll just call this sign in inputs, whatever you want to name it, just to make sure you remember. And now let's literally get rid of everything in this modal except for the heading. And beautiful. And let's go from default, let's make it centered, and let's go to large. And now we have the beginning of a modal for signing in. So we're going to click into this replace component. So click in until it shows up here. So replace component, we'll go and just do a search for sign in inputs, and we have it here, right here. And there you have it. The component is now inside of this modal. Lastly, let's just make a couple more changes. So I'm clicking in to this component, and we'll give it some padding top. Let's do 16, and we'll change this to say sign in. And let's say we want to make this a little bit bigger. So instead of headline large bold, let's do headline extra large bold. Okay, so now you have a simple modal with the different buttons that we worked on and some inputs, and it is responsive because this component is filling its container. So now let's create a button group. So with a lot of these components, I include a built-out version. So this is the button group, and in the properties panel, we can add more to it. I typically like to start off from the most elemental level, which is the button group item. So let's just drag this out, and this gives us a lot more customization, and it keeps our components simple and focused on what we need them for. So we will just get rid of the icons, and then let's just drag out a couple more. So let's say we want 3 in this case. So I'm gonna duplicate that one more time. We are going to wrap this in an auto layout. So Shift A, we're gonna select everything and make sure they are filling the container. And now we have a responsive button group. I did prototype some of the interactions here. So when you hover, it will have the hover state. So if you go to the prototype, we can see this in action. So now when I hover over, it's that light gray. Okay, so now we're gonna adjust this a little bit more, go back to design. We'll do, let's do a border radius of 8. And notice how that did not show up. And that's because this frame needs to clip the content. So now it is 8, that looks good. And now let's give it a drop shadow. So go to effects, let's just do small. That looks good. And so now we have our button group. Okay, so that covers buttons. In our next video, we're going to cover badges.